Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aptera Owners Club. Today, I wanted to talk about heating and heat pumps in the Aptera. I thought this was a kind of a relevant topic because a few days ago in Virginia, the I-95 was shut down by snowfall, and there's a big traffic jam, and people couldn't leave. And I think some people were stuck for like 16 or more hours in traffic. And uh, some people made the comment that if there were electric cars, they would have frozen to death. And there were some people in Pakistan that actually froze to death on top of a mountain because they were stranded. And this also reminded me of the time when I used to live in North Carolina, and back in 2005, there was less than half an inch of snow crippled the whole city, and people were abandoning their cars on I-40, and kids couldn't be picked up from school, and kids had to stay overnight at their schools, and people were just leaving their cars in the middle of the interstate because they couldn't drive the cars. It was kind of crazy. And so in lots of the parts of the country around this time of year, it's pretty cold. Fortunately, I live in Southern California. It was 71 and sunny today, so it's not as big of a deal. Um, so here's the from the Aptera Q&A session from December 8th, so about a month ago. Chris Anthony answered a question about heat pumps. Let's listen to what he said.
To have a heat pump strategy, but everyone is telling us that the heat pump development programs are lengthy in the 2+ year range. So it doesn't really fit with our timing. We're trying to work with vendors on a resistive heat for now, and some other additive cooling programs like cooling through our seats instead of having to pump all that through the dash. We're trying to work with vendors that have both those technologies and heat pump technology so we can build into the future. But we don't have a current plan for heat pump just because the development timing just takes too darn long, unfortunately.
All right, so that's kind of unfortunate. So Chris Anthony said basically it's going to take 2+ years to implement a heat pump in the Aptera, so they're going to go with resistive heating. The resistive heating that they are using is something called a PTC, and basically they're devices that look like this. And instead of having like electricity go through a hot wire and having air blow through it, these PTCs are solid state devices that basically they are not constant current, they're constant temperature. So as airflow moves over and extracts the heat from them, they will produce more heat. But if the airflow stops, it won't produce more heat. So they're much safer than the resistive heating. There's no chance of fires, and they're a lot more efficient in terms of electricity use. However, that doesn't mean that they're efficient because compared to heat pumps, because heat pumps are just better. The way that resistive or the PTC uh, heaters work is they convert the electric energy into heat energy. So if you want and they're very efficient in that almost all the heat, all the electricity is turned into heat energy. So like 3 watts of electricity will be turned into 3 watts of heating energy. Well, I guess joules is the more correct. Watts is a power thing. Joules is more of the energy thing. But anyways, it's very efficient. However, heat pumps are more efficient because you don't generate the heat. You just use the electricity to move the heat from the outside of the vehicle to the inside of the vehicle. So they're thought to be about twice as efficient, and maybe sometimes up to about 3 times as efficient. It kind of depends on the ambient temperature outside. If the ambient temperature outside is like, let's say, like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, or so, then there's still a significant amount of heat, and you can move that heat inside to make the inside of the cabin like 65, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas if it's like 10 degrees Fahrenheit, there's just not that much heat outside to move inside. So the benefits of heat pumps is best between the temperatures of about 40 degrees to about 50, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Below that, the benefits are a lot less, and when it gets really, really cold, the benefits aren't great because you're going to expend just as much energy trying to move what little heat is outside to the inside as you would if you would have just used the resistive heater. So it is kind of outside temperature dependent. However, heat pumps overall are more efficient, which is why Tesla moved to them. In 2020, the 2021 refresh of the Model 3, they added the heat pump, and the Model Y got the heat pump as well. Um, Bjorn Nyland, who is a fairly well-known EV enthusiast in Norway, he ran a test. He concluded that the Model 3 with the heat pump, without the heat pump, required about 2,000 watts, and the Model 3 with the heat pump required about 7,000 watts, which is about 3 times more efficient. Now, Electrek thought that he didn't use the calculations correctly, so it's probably more like twice as efficient. And that goes in line with this guy. He has a channel called What Drives You. He ran a test with a Model Y and a Model 3, and the Model Y having is slightly bigger and has more internal volume than the Model 3, so it's going to require a little bit more heat. He tested it on this spreadsheet. He calculated how long it takes, how much energy it took to keep the inside temperature at 70 degrees for an hour when the outside temperature is 28 degrees Fahrenheit. And so the Model Y has the heat pump. The Model 3 does not have the heat pump in this case. And he used 3 kilowatt hours here and about 5 kilowatt hours here. If he calculates by battery percentage, he got about 3.5 versus 5. So given that the Model Y has a little bit more internal volume than the Model 3, you would guess it's about twice as efficient, roughly. I mean, these are all kind of rough estimates, but at this temperature range, the heat pump was about twice as efficient. You used about half the amount of energy, roughly, if you kind of took into account the changes in internal volume here. And then more recently, Dirty Tesla ran a test at negative 11 degrees Celsius or 12 degrees Fahrenheit, which is significantly colder. So the heat pump would be a little bit less efficient at this outside ambient temperature. And he used a Model Y, which has a heat pump, and compared it to a Model X, which does not have a heat pump. Now, you have to understand that the Model X has more internal volume than the Model Y, so you have to take that into account. But basically, he kept the inside temperature at 70 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 hours, so a much longer test. Longer tests take out a lot of the variation, so it's probably a more accurate test. And he used 26 kilowatt hours at so 26 kilowatt hours. And then the Model X, he found out that he uses 43 kilowatt hours to heat it for 12 hours. So that's about, if you take into account the greater volume of the Model X, I mean, it's probably a little bit less than twice as efficient. So, overall, looking at the three things, you could say that on average, the heat pump is probably about twice as efficient as the PTC resistive heater. Now, if you look at the Aptera has a composite body structure, so that has a lot less heat conductivity than metal bodies. So that probably works in Aptera's favor. And the internal volume of the Aptera was quite small. So I would maybe estimate that the internal volume of the Aptera is less than half of a Model X. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't looked at the total internal volume structures, but I just ballpark guess, since this video is just all kind of very rough ballpark estimates. So if the Model X used 43 kilowatt hours to keep it at 70 degrees at an ambient temperature of 12 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite cold, and you say the Aptera has basically half the volume, and I would say that's being generous, probably less than half the volume. And then taking into account that the Aptera has a composite body structure, which is going to be less heat conductive, so it probably insulates a little bit better than the metal body. My rough estimate on how much battery it would take to keep it at 12 hours at 70 degrees internally is probably a little bit under 20 kilowatt hours. So if you got a The 40 kilowatt hour pack, which is I think the most common order, that's the size that I ordered. You could hold this temperature for over 24 hours at a very cold outdoor ambient temperature. The the other thing that you might consider doing is that probably a lot of the heat loss comes through this glass um, hood. You could put some kind of like a sleeping bag or something to separate the passenger compartment from the back compartment. And also, they're adding heated seats and cooled seats to the Aptera. That's very common in electric vehicles because you can transfer heat to a human body in multiple ways. One way is through radiation, which we don't really do. Radiative heat is not really done in cars. Then there's airflow and contact heat by airflow. Air is not a very heat doesn't hold a lot of heat, so you don't get much transfer of heat through the air, and it's very inefficient to transfer heat through the air. But that's what how internal combustion cars do it, and that's because internal combustion cars just have a lot of waste heat available. The gas engines are about 35% efficient, so more than 60% of the energy of the gasoline is just wasted as heat. So they just have a lot of excess heat, and they just pump the coolant through a heater core, and you can just get gobs of heat out of an internal combustion car because they just have so much extra that's just being wasted. However, an electric car, they don't have a lot of extra heat because it's so efficient, because electric drivetrains are like 90 to 95% efficient, and the motors themselves are like 95 plus percent efficient. So you're just not going to get a lot of heat out of them. So most electric cars have heated seats, and heated seats are the most efficient way of transferring heat to you, and they use very little heat in comparison to running the heat. So if you were in a situation like this and you really were low on batteries, probably the smartest thing to do is just put on the heated seats and keep the ambient heat off. I don't know if the Aptera is going to have heated steering wheels, but that's also a nice feature because people tend to get cold hands, and a heated steering wheel also is a very efficient way to transfer heat. So we know from Chris Anthony's answer that Aptera will not have a heat pump. That does impact the efficiency of the vehicle in terms of heating. So it's going to be about half as efficient for the same amount of heating in the car. In most cases, it's not going to be a big problem. You know, in an hour long drive, it's gonna make a difference of maybe 1 kilowatt hour at best, which is not a big deal. But over, if you were in a situation where you were like using it for camping mode or something like that, and you wanted heat while you were camping, or you were stuck in the middle of the freeway in one of these freak accidents, where people get stuck on the highway, like it happens, seems to happen in the Southwest, where people aren't used to the infrastructure isn't used to dealing with winter weather very often. So when it does happen, there are some big problems. If you happen to end up like that, then the heat pump will make somewhat of a difference. But even if you were with the small volume of the Aptera, it seems like a 400 kilowatt hour battery pack would keep you warm for a minimum of a day, which a full 24-hour day, which should be plenty. And then if you were in dire straits and had less batteries, probably the thing to do is just turn off the air heat and turn on the heated seats. You may not be comfortable, but would definitely keep you from getting hypothermia, because that would be the most efficient way to transfer heat into your body. So if you guys did not know, that is the current status. Doesn't We are not getting heat pumps, although Chris Anthony said that they are looking at uh, getting parts from a supplier so that in the future they can convert to heat pumps, because I think that is their ultimate goal. It just did not fit with their timeline, and I think me personally, this whole thing doesn't matter to me because I live in Southern California and heating is never an issue. Um, but I know those of you guys that live in colder climates, heating is very important. You will have heat, and you can be very comfortable in your car. in an Aptera, you will be able to keep the temperature at 70 degrees plus, and in a normal situation, you will have plenty of battery power to do that for drives of several hours. So it shouldn't be a major problem, but in terms of pure efficiency, a heat pump would have been better. Okay, well, if you have any comments, you can put them in the comments below, and thanks for watching, guys.